Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who is really going to help us move in the right direction faster. Dave Mattson grew up in Simsbury, Connecticut, born into a single-income family as the eldest of 4 boys. The boys were raised to believe that they could have anything their hearts desired as long as they paid for it. As a result, Dave grew up as a worker, shoveling snow in the winter, delivering papers and mowing lawns in the summer. As he grew older, he hired on to pick tobacco, since that was the only job that a 14-year-old could legally be hired for. In high school, Dave worked 3 jobs and eventually started his own painting company, which he managed for 6 years and eventually sold when he graduated from the University of Connecticut. During his period of life, Dave learned the value of hard work, how to deal with people from all backgrounds, the importance of talking about and dealing with money, and the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur. Dave has taken this experience and learned how to connect the dots in a conversation and develop the ability to relate the unrelated. As an introvert, he doesn't have the need to dominate conversations, choosing instead to listen more than he speaks. This has served him well in both management and selling. He brought his extraordinary work ethic to Sandler. He is known as an over-preparer and has developed a knack for understanding people and knowing what they need to become successful. Over the years, he has learned that people love to edit, not create. So he shows up with ideas and encourages others to beat them up and make them better while simultaneously gaining buy-in. Mattson joined Sandler in 1988, learning under his mentor and company founder, David Sandler. Since that time, he has authored several programs, started the firm's global consulting and training company, created its national branding program, and risen from COO to partner to owner of Sandler in 2012. He has expanded Sandler into 31 countries and over 250 training centers. He tries to impart to everyone he meets that hard work pays off. It's important to be transparent in every facet of your life, and the key to success is getting people to work with you, not for you. Dave currently resides in Phoenix, Maryland, a suburb of Baltimore, with his wife and their 5 children. He was a founding member of Susie's Cause in supporting the fight against colon cancer and enjoys fishing, time at the beach, and traveling with his family. Dave Mattson, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. Well, my current passion outside of work is fly fishing. I've always loved to fly fish. I can do it when I want, don't necessarily need a big crowd. So it's one of those things where I can make a decision, hey, let's go. And, to be honest, it's one of those things where I know there's always fish there. And I'm the one I'm the variable, right? So I'm the one that's either not using the right fly, not doing the right float, not doing this. There's so many variables, much like golf, that you've got to get everything, just right to get it done. And you're never great at it. So you're always constantly striving to become better and better at that particular sport. So that's what I enjoy.
Well, listening to you say that, and also having the opportunity to look over your book, The Road to Excellence, 6 Leadership Strategies to Build a Bulletproof Business, I start seeing a lot of similarities in what you just talked about in the fly fishing puzzle, the fly fishing problem solving when it comes to building a business. It's finding the right thing. It's, not being aware of where the fish are. It's right. A whole lot of, guessing and testing and validating. And a whole lot of things that are going on there.
Well, that's true. If you think about both of them, the similarities for me are, you can go into a new place. You can't live on yesterday's successes because that was at a different spot, a different time. So you've got to look forward, but learn from the past. You also cannot be impatient. You have to figure out what's going on, sit back for a second, look at the forest, not the trees, and say, okay, what is going on here? And really be objective and question yourself at all times, which is what I do anyways. I'm always questioning myself, which has gotten me this far, and I'm not really going to change that. But I think when it comes to your point, when it comes to fishing and that, I think it is true. I think we always have to, always figure out how to become better. Always know that it's something in my control, that it's me. I can't do the woe is me, it's the environment, woe is me, it's this. What can I do? So I step up and don't play the victim and take control and figure out what I can do with the environment that I've been given.
I also started thinking too about, okay, so Sandler is primarily known for, sales selling. I've had Josh Seibert on the show, Brian Sullivan on the show, you on the show. And however, you guys talk so much more about the leadership aspect of the business, more so than you talk about the actual sales outcome. Why is that?
Obviously we are known for sales tactics, right? I mean, that's, people say Sandler, they'll say, oh, awesome sales training. I think when it comes to leadership, obviously that's the topic of the new book, but I also think that you have to control yourself, right? So even if you want to be a professional salesperson and you want to go above and beyond the pack, you want to be in that top 20%, you've got 3 areas that you need to focus in on, which is attitudes, behaviors, and technique. So technique, Sandler's awesome at, but technique by itself is only going to get you so far. So if you want to sustain that upward hockey stick growth pattern, you've got to have the mindset to get yourself there where you're not fearing success, you're not fearing failure, you've got the confidence and conviction, and then you've got really have to become a behavioralist. And I think all that self-leadership stuff, you incorporated, is really important if you're going to excel, whether it's in sales leadership, and or sales in general. So I think they're all combined.
That's a good point. Okay, so when you start talking about, the roadmap to organizational excellence, you talk about 6 Ps, and I don't really want to go into those on the show. I mean, people can get the book and get into those, because there's a couple other points of this book that I really want us to dig a little bit deeper into. But just for sake of mentioning, the 6 Ps are planning, positions, people, processes, performetrics, and passion. However, you talk about an excellence process insight to me that really stood out. And you talk about that you must set your own measurable performance benchmarks and find a way to hold yourself accountable for attaining them. And then not doing so is a major blind spot. And you talk a lot about blind spots in the book. And that essentially leads up to having the 6 Ps put in place so that you can become more clear and have a clear roadway, know where you're going, right? But when you start talking about the excellence process, one of the things that kind of has always bothered me is the difference between accountability and ownership. And I think too many people want to hold other people accountable in a negative context, instead of saying, you know what, I want you to own this, and how can I enable you to own it? Mm-hmm. So in the excellence process insight, is that born out of that, or did it come from somewhere else?
Well, I think, to your point, one, I think that we as leaders, we want a culture of accountability. And the people who work for us want to be able to be clear on the expectations given to them. They want to know absolutely what are my guardrails that I can operate within? What do I have the right to make decisions on, and what can I? And that clarity, to be honest, Jim, normally doesn't exist. In my mind, I've given it to you. You're sitting back, not wondering, hey, can I move forward as if, you don't want to pop your head up too high because maybe you get whacked depending on the company culture. So there's a million things to this, mutual mystification that are going on. But if I step back one more step, because you've said 2 things, is I have to be congruent myself. I mean, for me to say, you should be on time, you should be doing this, and I'm showing up a half hour late to meetings, I've missed most of my deadlines, but because I'm the owner, I get a get out of jail card free. That is garbage. That's like telling your kids not to smoke because that's what you believe in, and you're in your 3rd cigar at dinner. I mean, it's just incongruent.
That's so true. Especially with the generation that we have today. I mean, they've got to see it in you before Absolutely. They try to instill it up in themselves. Absolutely. Okay. I mean, if you're going to lead with what you consider to be excellent, right? Yeah. Not what you say. Another thing that I really liked is you talk about the key attributes of effective performance that leads into that whole ownership, and I want you to actually move things forward. And then you talk about, and I think there's a whole lot of these blind spot things in here as far as avoiding them. As you said, tied to the overall vision of the organization, tied to the top 3 key priorities, established for every function in the organization, documented in job description. It goes on, and there's several things when people find the book that I think are going to be elements that kind of what you just said a moment ago. People really don't know what the expectation is, and they don't know the performance outcome that has to be in place in order for that success to occur.
Right. I think one of the best things that David Sandler, and I had the honor to work with him very closely from 1988 when I came to home office to 95 when he had passed, that he really managed me using the 3 Ps, which is potency, protection, and permission. And he gave me permission to act as if once I understood the guardrails that I could operate within. So, David, I give you permission to just do your thing. You may make some bad decisions. I get all that, but I will protect you on the decisions that you make, within the guardrails, and I will protect you. And when you need to come tell me the truth when we're off track, because most people, they're so afraid they don't say anything. They spend half their life hiding the mess, whereas they could have just said, "Hey, David, here's the situation. What should I be doing? I think I'm way over my head on this one." So that open relationship has now really carried itself to what we teach and how we run the business, because when he did that to me, I believe that I took projects and initiatives that he gave me that I probably would have taken it to a 6 and say, "Okay, now David, here it is. David Sandler, here it is. You take it over the finish line." No way. If he expected 100, I gave it back to him at 120 because I knew exactly what was supposed to have been done. I validated what he wanted me to do. I sent it back to him, made sure I understood it. I created a roadmap. I had benchmarks. I checked along the way, and it was empowering. And I really just stepped up to the plate. Now, we had other people, Jim, that didn't step up to the plate. They were still operating on, I don't know what to do, hesitancy, no confidence, no conviction, but they don't own the company now, right? So it's just really offered me a chance to just step it up. And I always remember that. And that's what we do now.
I think what you just described right there to me is a great framework for people who you want to become high performers. Now, oftentimes they may not even see that themselves, but giving them that type of framework and that autonomy could really be a key differentiator. And I think that's lacking in a lot of organizations today. I mean, we see across the board drops in creative thinking, drops in innovation, drops in R&D ROI. I mean, it's just going on and on and on because that framework is lacking.
Absolutely. And I think if we even go further than that, let's take any initiative that an owner or a leader, says, "Hey, this is where we're going." How many times do they really rally the troops and over communicate that? I know most of the clients that I'll have will send out a memo and they'll do a company meeting. This is where we're headed. But Jim, you and I know, for me, I do videos, internally. This is all internal stuff. I'll do videos. I do town hall meetings. I'll send podcasts. I've got people in the field who are doing what I want them to do, and I use them as examples. Because we've got so many different people in the workforce, I have to send that message through so many different modalities. And because it takes me 18 months to socialize an idea, I think most leaders stop around month, 2 and say, "Well, they got it. I mean, what do you want me to do? I sent the memo. Everyone understands it." But that's a huge mistake. And I think if I tie it back to the allowing me to be self-sufficient, which is the ultimate goal of a leader, I think that's true as well. When you give me a project, if I don't know the guardrails and I don't know what I'm able to do, then, I think what happens is, as a leader, we think about this 24/7 for 30 days. I have a 15-minute conversation with you, and I think that you're on the same page as I am. You're not. You're on the same page I was 29 days ago. I'm so far ahead of you, but I forget that. And that's really a big mistake.
Yeah, that's the big curse of knowledge that Chip and Dan Heath talk about, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, so another thing that I really liked in the book is you talk about the 10 commandments of acceleration for business leaders. And I would like to spend a moment or two on these 10. And again, I don't want to read them all, but if you start talking about these 10, when you start talking about things that are like critical, like I tell my kids about the 10 commandments, like, honor thy father and mother. For me, that's one of the most important, right? Which one of these 10 do you think really stands out as something that's key?
It's different for lots of different groups. I have to say, your audience better. If you had to pick one for the leaders that are in your audience, which one pops out for you? Because I'm just interested in it because it's so different depending on where you are in the world and where you are in your business. What do you think pops out?
There's really a couple. For me, I think mentoring and coaching others to create passion in themselves is really something that is a huge gap.
I do too. Listen, coaching is one of those things where you should spend 45% of your time as in a daily function. We have 4 hats on any leader, right? And we're switching these hats a million times during the day. I've got a supervision hat, I've got a coaching hat, I've got a training hat, I have a mentoring hat. And most of us live in supervision because we think that's what management is. And maybe that's what management was to you. And that's the other problem. Leaders aren't really trained. Sales leadership, as an example, is the least trained group of people in our company, which is shocking because they're required to bring in the revenue for our company. Nothing happens unless sales leadership does their job. They are responsible for 100% of that revenue. We don't train them. What typically happens is, Jim, I'm looking around, my sales manager disappears, and I say, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do their job and my job. This is insane. And so I look for my top stud or studette, and I say, you know what? I've had my eye on you, Jim. I've always said that you're the future leader. I'd like you to run this group now and just keep doing what you do, Jim. I want you just to replicate yourself and life will be good for all of us. And I talk you into this position. And then I say, thank goodness now Jim's off and running. Well, that's not really what happens. We really have to coach and train our people. And, most people think coaching is you coming to me and say, hey, Dave, what should I do? Jim, do this, and this. Okay, well, that doesn't necessarily work. First of all, you only do 5% of what I said. And if it goes well, you take credit. If it goes poorly, it's my fault. So I think coaching really helps people become self-sufficient, self-aware. And that's not me telling you something. It's you self-discovering. Therefore, you will do it again on your own in the future. And now you know all the sayings, right? Hey, teach them how to fish, all that stuff. But I think the aha moments that come from coaching, when you act like a doctor and ask the right questions and let people self-discover, but with a formula, I think that's really special. And we've gotten 10 sales behaviors that I think any salesperson should be able to do. And those things, regardless, and Jim, for anyone that's listening, it really starts off in account development, goes all the way through the sales process, all the way to account management. And you could figure that out for any one of the listeners' businesses. But if you're coaching to something specific, and asking you to rate yourself on each of those areas that I think are important for you to become great at in my business. And because if you think you're a 3 and I think you're a 3, we should work on that. If I think you're a 3 and you're a 9 on, let's say, account development, we've got a disconnect. So we should be talking about that. And then the other thing is to tie in what happens if we improve. So let's use account development. If you and I both agree that you're a 3 out of 10 in that area, and I say, Jim, what happens if we got you to a 7? Because I noticed you want to go from a 3 to a 7. Dave, here's what would happen. I'd get X amount of people in my funnel, X amount of people would come out the back end. And I said, which would mean X amount of commission for me, which then I can spend money on my kids' education. And now I've tied in my corporate goal to your goal, which is a huge blind spot. And then we say, okay, well, let's get working on this thing. And now you're motivated versus me picking, Jim, you're no good at account development. Let's talk about that today. And now here comes the PowerPoint, what's a death march. And that's not really what should happen, but it's what does happen.
I think you just explained the huge difference between, what is a good coach and an effective coach and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, looking through the book, going through and talking about all these blind spots and having the discussion that we had before we even got on the show. I know there's a lot of quotes that actually drive you and help you point north. Is there 1 or 2 of those that you can share?
The quotes that I like, let's see. If you don't have a plan, by default, you'll fall into somebody else's plan. I really do believe that was beat into me by Sandler. He would always say, David, what's your plan? And I was always reactive. I would come and just hear what you had to say and then react off of that. And then I learned something very interesting to me as he was molding me into becoming a leader. He said, watch what happens when people show up with a plan. documents, like here's how I think we should attack it. And what I realized is people react to those who brought a plan. Right. So it's not that, hey, we're going to put your stuff away. It's we react to it. We edit it. We make it better. We socialize it. And from that day forward, I say, that's kind of cool. So if you show up with your idea, first thing you should realize is 90% of the population shows up with nothing. So your idea by default is something that we're going to be working on, which is huge as a leader. You should always realize that. And the second thing is now, if I don't have a plan on where we want to go as a leader or what we'd like to do, by default, I'm going to follow somebody else's. And it could be a VP of sales. It could be this. And I'm not saying it's bad because you want other people to create the plan of action as well. I get all that. But from an organizational standpoint, I think that is huge. The other quote for me is who you are is not who you I. And R stands for role, Jim. I stands for identity. And I think people get confused. As a human, I have a million roles. I'm a parent, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a husband. I fly fish. We talked about that. I'm an owner, and the list of things that I do goes on, right? And as you get older, that list just expands. I is identity. And so what that means is, I may have all these roles. Like even today, my role, I'm on a podcast role. I'm the brand of Sandler. Then I'm going to go downstairs and I've got 16 other different roles. So there's a million things going on. But if I do poorly in one of them, which is bound to happen, I mean, let's face it, right? So let's say that I did a bad job today parenting. I made a mistake, once again. So what happens? Does that mean I'm a complete failure on all the other things that I'm doing? No, it doesn't. It just means that for that particular role, I was no good at it today and I need to improve. That sounds so simple, but think about a salesperson on our team. They get rejected at 9:00. Do they just write that off and say, you know what, that's 1 of 30 in the thing. I've learned from that. I'm moving on. Or do they, oh no, that was my biggest account. Here we go. I'm getting killed. I hate this. My pricing model's no good. I got no support. And here comes the blame game. And they absolutely get sucked down. And what happens, as is, the way people see themselves conceptually is directly proportionate to how they operate in their role. And that's why, from a sales perspective and an owner perspective, you really do need to be an I-10, which is self-concept. You may not going to make the right decisions all the time. I get it, but you have to look at yourself with a healthy self-esteem. Otherwise, your roles will self-adjust. Let's do social. Pick somebody, Mike Tyson. He was an R10. He was a machine at his day, a machine. People were frightened. And then what happens? He imploded because he didn't see his self-concept as the R10. He was a kid that shouldn't have made it that far. And hey, look at me, my gosh. And all of a sudden he went from 2 million or 200 million down to bankrupt because he just self-adjusted. And I think that you can look at movie star after movie star. It happens all the time. But it doesn't just happen in sports and in Hollywood. It happens, just look down the hallway. People are adjusting all the time. As a leader, you've had to say to yourself, that person should be operating at 80% of higher. I mean, they have it. What's going on? But they have other issues. So they're looking at failure and success, from a very myopic standpoint. And you really have to step back and say, look, I've got a million things going on. It goes up and down. But here's how I see myself conceptually. I am bulletproof. I'm going to learn. So it means I'm arrogant, not arrogant. And so I think that's the two that stick out for me.
Gosh, as you were talking, I started thinking so much about, ebbs, like you were talking about the ebbs and flows, and why it's so important to have somebody as the good coach, and they're hard to find. To have that coach in order to help your down cycles, be as short as they possibly can, because they're going to happen.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
They're going to happen. Okay. So, talking about down cycles and being able to move up and get over them, we talk about getting over humps on the show. And you shared with me a couple stories, of times that you had to get over the hump. And we kind of honed in on one because it had, a lot of dynamics associated with it, both personal and professional. And can you please share us that time when you've had to get over the hump?
Sure. For me, I think there's two major speed bumps in my life. And of course, there's a million of them, right? But the ones that really shaped me more than others, the first one was I've been in Sandler for 3 years, maybe 4. And David and I got along very well. I was his protege. I was doing all the things. I hit all the benchmarks. He asked me to be his partner. It was fast forward here. And he said, David, here's what it's going to be. Buy 25% of the company. We'd like to have you part of the business. Now, I'm the only non-family member in the business, right? So here we go. So I go out and try to find money. Well, my first aha was, hey, look at Sandler. You guys, the bankers should just look at it and give me the money. I mean, this is like a no-brainer. I don't understand. But here they're looking at me as a 28-year-old saying, no, I don't think so. First of all, you don't own 100%, so we have no collateral, blah, 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 blah. And I went from banker to banker to banker and got killed. Now, think about where I was. I was a stud looking for money. I was feeling like a dud pretty quickly. We're going back to our previous conversation, right? My self-esteem is like in the toilet. And so what do I do? And I happened to just mention something at a Thanksgiving thing. I said, this is really hard. I thought this was going to be simple. Now I'm months into it, right? I'm just trying to do my job. I've got a million little fear, doubt, and worry things picking at my brain. And my parents, without my knowledge, put up their homes because they had a vacation home and a primary home, and they put their retirement money on the line as a collateral for the bank above and beyond what I had to get me the loan to buy Sandler. And so that was a huge hump. I would have never been here if it wasn't for that. I didn't ask them. And to be honest, Jim, if my kids asked me to put everything on the line, I'm not sure I would do it. I mean, I not that I don't love them. I don't know why they did that, and I'm forever grateful. They saw in me, I guess, that, hey, I had that. And so that was one. And if I fast forward, the same type of thing popped up. I'm running the business now. I'm the VP of sales. I only owned 25%. I'm running national accounts. So I'm zipping around, closing big deals. And I found myself without much discussion as a single parent, boom, like overnight. And I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I was a single parent trying to figure out, wait a minute now. First, did I actually cause this problem because I was too focused on the business side? Did I cause that? Which I will deny, of course, because that's just protection, which I'm sure is a lie. So then I say, well, what am I going to do? Because the business can't survive without me. Oh my gosh, all roads lead to David. But you know what happened? That was the biggest aha moment that I had, actually, because I realized that I had to scale the business and all roads could not lead to me, because that was a huge mistake. It was great for my ego and I was juggling all these balls and I was doing it successfully. But the fact of the matter is you can't triple your business under that model. And so that happened. And I just became a process animal, because there's not enough hours in the day. And what I had to do is I learned how to recipe everything. This is what I'm doing Tuesdays, and I just categorized and became an absolute process animal to survive. And that has really gone throughout the whole business. And so I look at younger people who step up and want to do X, Y, and Z, and I see myself in them. I see people struggling around, but I also, on the other side though, Jim, when people say, well, I've got so many things going on, I can't do that. Well, are you not willing or you're not able? And I don't, it's your choice. I'm not forcing you to do one or the other, but you're going to have to figure out, I don't want you to sacrifice your family for sure. I mean, because that's super important. But at the same time, you got to figure it out, and have that work-life balance, but still get your stuff done, because it's not unreasonable. You have to become process-oriented, or at least some system for yourself, for you to survive and for you to really thrive. I mean, that's the bottom line. So those are two, I think, that pop out for me.
Going back to the whole, would I do it as a parent? I mean, that's a great question. I'm not there yet, and I guess we'll see what happens. As far as, the whole process thing, I think you're so dead on in a lot of different ways. And also that process thing, well, and let me say, I have a good friend of mine who works with a lot of organizations in a legacy type of format, meaning you have owner. I mean, this is like millions of people right now have businesses, small, medium-sized businesses that they have no family to leave it to. And so for them, they have to look at putting their businesses up for sale. And for many of these organizations, they've operated for so long in a format where it's just like, well, hey, so-and-so knows how to do that. And they haven't been able to scale. and they now can't sell the business because people look at it and they're like, well, where's your processes? How can anybody step in and be able to take over and do this particular job? And the typical human reaction is, well, I'm protecting my space and my territory. And you can't allow that to happen because it's a detriment to that individual because they're not developing other people. They're not developing the business. And then overall, the business as a whole. So
and it's not even true. I mean, it's a fantasy. People, they freak out. Process. I'm not a process person. Oh, I'm going to spend 18 hours. I don't look at process as compliance. I look at process as a playbook. You do it naturally. You always want to figure out what's the best way to do X. And it could be the best way to mow your lawn, could be the best way to get to work. We all do it. We do it all day long. How do we get better at this? How do we do this? So we create these playbooks mentally for ourselves on everything that we do. But when you ask people to write it down, oh, wait a minute, you're forcing me micromanagement. This is not the culture that I want. I think it's foolish. I think you can have both. I don't look at it as a compliance issue. I look at it as a self-survival thrive issue because to your point, when you say, well, such and such can do it. Well, guess what? 87% of executives can retire this year. Not saying they are, but they can. And so when such and such can do it, well, such and such isn't here anymore. I mean, they just left. So what am I doing? There is no such and such. There's a gaping hole, regardless if it's process or client relationships or anything. I go through my company and say, if that person left tomorrow, what would I be doing? How am I reacting? Versus getting Dave, we appreciate the last 20 years. We've decided to move on. What? And now I'm scrambling. So that's just how I look at it.
That's a great point. I also refer to it as the hit by bus theory.
Exactly. It's realistic. It's realistic,
You talked about a lot of things going on. You talked about loving to fly fishing, talking about building the business. You got the book promote. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are happening. But if you were to talk about one goal that you have, what would that one goal be?
Transform our company. We are a 50-year-old company. We've won tons of awards. We're primarily facilitator led. We have 265 training centers, so people come to us or we go to you. I have 5 kids, Jim. They're not learning the way that I'm learning and the way that you're learning. And so my personal goal is to really shift the business to take care of different groups. I consume content differently, and I have to make sure that the kids that are coming up, like my children who are in college and out, the new people in the workforce consume content differently. The millennials are consuming content differently. So for us to shift has been huge, especially when I'm 54 years old. And so I grew up, if you put your content online, there's no way people are going to pay you for it then. You've just shot yourself in the foot. What are you doing? But YouTube fixed it. I mean, they have changed everything. And we have the younger generation has grown up in a completely different environment. And I know I sound like my parent because I'm sure they said the same thing about us. But if you're not going to change, you're going to get killed. And so for us, we have shifted everything over to platforms where people can access thousands of podcasts and videos. We've got tools now. And so it's really done a lot of things for us unintended consequences, but really catapulted us forward in a lot of different ways because, the other goal, which is tied in, Jim, we were really bad at tracking our clients. We have millions of ex-clients. If I walk through an airport with a Sandler shirt on, people will yell Sandler terms, and they don't know who I am. So they just love the stuff, but I don't know who any of them are. And that has really, if you look at the other technology companies that are thriving, whether you look at LinkedIn or Salesforce, I mean, they know who their ecosystem is and they nurture their ecosystem. And we just historically never did that. So we are scrambling to go find who they are. Because I also know that the people that we trained 15 years ago, they're all in leadership roles. They all love us. And so that's really one of the goals, is to get ourselves into a new place and time and then go find our past client base through technology, because I don't know who they are, and get them back into our ecosystem.
Well, the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that improves the empathy and emotional intelligence skills in everyone. It provides a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement and provides integrated activities that will improve the leadership and collaboration skills in everyone. This award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and higher-performing employees that have great working relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about an even better place to work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Dave, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Dave Mattson, are you ready to Hoedown?
Of course.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I think continually looking backwards, Jim, and making sure that everybody is okay for the ride moving forward. So I spend a lot of time building that bridge, and I think that probably holds us back as a company a little more than it should. But there's this this give-pull thing. I don't know which the best way to do it is. So if I had to look back, I'd say I'd probably do a lot more pulling.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
The best leadership advice is inclusion. Don't read your own press, and really make sure that the people are clear, they're on board, and you give them the ability to succeed.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I'm always worried. I mean, to me, I'm always looking for the reason why this isn't going to work. And then I'm pleasantly surprised when it doesn't, versus I've said it's going to work and I haven't really done that. So I think if I'm constantly thinking about things, I'm constantly worried, entrepreneurial horror, we all have it. That's really what's helped me get this far. And I've watched a lot of people who have left that mentality get killed.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Playbook. I create playbooks for everything that we do, which is capturing best practices. And that way I can replicate it for a lot of things that I don't do all the time, let's say, but also I can give that playbook to my staff, and they can increase their efficiency very, very quickly.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? It could be from any genre. And of course, we're going to put a link to The Road to Excellence on our show notes page as well.
Well, the book that changed my life was You Can't Teach a Kid How to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. I mean, that was just a killer for me, because it was written not in a sales environment, but really in a social environment. And then it bridged over to a sales environment. I also like The Power of Influence by Robert Cialdini. I thought that was an awesome book as well. There's a million of them there, but I tend to gravitate towards the psychological portion of what people do and why they do it, because then I can attribute that to anything that I do.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Dave. Now, David Mattson. We're going to do David Mattson for his show notes page. Okay, Dave, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I think I would take back confidence and conviction. So I think the lessons, they're important as you learn them, if you're willing to keep an open mind. So I think those lessons would come even if I was 25. But I think the confidence and conviction that you have is 50. If I could bring that back at 25, then I would accelerate all my successes and failures. But I also wouldn't second guess. I woulda, coulda, shoulda. That would have disappeared, because as you become more and more comfortable in your skin, whenever that is for you, I think if I could have that at 25, even though I was 25 going on 40, to be honest, but I think that would probably be the best thing that I could take back in time.
Dave, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Sure. They can go to Sandler.com. And I'll tell you what, Jim, they could go to Sandler.com, find the local training center, and just call up and crash a class. Go see what you love, whether it's management or sales. Sit in it on me and just say, hey, we listened to Dave and Jim, and so they're there. So you can go to Sandler.com or dmattson@Sandler.com.
Dave Mattson, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.